During the summer after I graduated high school, I started working as a security guard at the mall to earn some extra cash before I went off to college. It was pretty convenient since I worked during the day. What I'm about to tell you happened when I was assigned to the night shift. It wasn't my usual routine, but one of my peers had to switch due to an engagement. I geared up for the shift, hoping it would be as uneventful as the daytime, but I wasn't prepared for how creepy the mall looked at night. Most of the lights were turned off, leaving only a few dimly lit areas. It sent shivers down my spine every time I walked through those empty hallways. Somehow I finished my rounds, checking every nook and cranny of the mall. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and I finally retreated to the security room for a much-needed break. But as I sipped on my coffee, I glanced at the monitor, catching a glimpse of movement on one of the cameras. My heart skipped a beat, and I moved closer to the monitor. There was nothing there now, but I could have sworn it looked like someone had just passed by a moment ago. I immediately grabbed my flashlight, ready to investigate. I hurried to the section of the mall where the camera had detected movement, but when I arrived, there was no one in sight. I swept my flashlight across the area, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever I had seen on the monitor, and that's when I heard it, a muffled sound. Like a disruption in a radio transmission. It took me a moment to realize it was coming from the mall speakers nearby. Someone was in the security room I had just left barely a moment ago. Without hesitation, I rushed back upstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. But when I entered, there was no one in the room. My eyes fell upon the microphone hanging from its wire, abandoned. It was as if someone had just left in a haste. Okay, at least now I knew I hadn't imagined it. I placed it back in its place. As I turned to glance at the monitor once more, a chill ran down my spine. On the screen was a figure of a man standing between the passage. I quickly noted down the location and picked up my intercom. I alerted the rest of the security team requesting backup. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something sinister was about to unfold. Not wasting a moment longer, I sprinted downstairs, my flashlight illuminating the path ahead. And to my surprise, the figure was still there, completely motionless. As I drew closer and shone my light upon it, my eyes widened in disbelief. It was a mannequin, out of place in the middle of the path. It was clear that someone with malicious intent had purposefully put it there to deceive me. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. Thinking that it was the backup security personnel, I turned around, but my relief turned to horror. In front of me stood a masked man, gripping a blood-stained knife. His mask had an awful grin painted on it. I realized the danger I was in and was beginning to panic. Summoning my courage, I backed away slowly, warning the intruder that the police were on their way. But the man remained motionless, aside from tilting his head, his eyes gazing upon me with a chilling intensity. It became clear that reasoning with him was a waste of time. I braced myself for the worst and scoped out the nearest exit, ready to run for my life. Just then, I heard the sound of running footsteps. I knew backup was approaching, but before I could fully grasp the situation, the lights of the mall suddenly went out, plunging everything into pitch-black darkness. I held my breath, my heart pounding against my chest. Fear paralyzed me as I felt someone's breath on the back of my neck. As if the person were standing right behind me. But then, as suddenly as he had come, he vanished. The lights flickered back on with no sign of the man who had been standing right there a moment ago. The cops arrived, sweeping the mall in search of the intruder, but their efforts were in vain. There was no trace of the masked man, only the lifeless body of the guard who was supposed to be making rounds in the parking lot. As the authorities investigated the gruesome scene, I was called to identify the suspect. While the CCTV footage clearly showed him when I found him, there was no footage of him entering the mall. How did he get inside without setting off the alarms? Nobody knows. Needless to say, I resigned from my post right away. To this day, I can't forget how that stranger looked at me, or what could have happened had the authorities not shown up when they did. I remember the incident like it happened only yesterday. I was just a high school kid looking to make some extra cash during the holidays, as Christmas was approaching. One day, as I strolled through the local mall, a help wanted sign caught my eye. The job involved dressing up as Santa's little helper, an elf, and helping kids sit on Santa's lap for photos. Without much thought, I decided to take the job. It was a fairly easy one, and the guy playing Santa was always friendly. Sometimes I couldn't help but wonder how he looked without the fake beard and the Santa suit. One day when I arrived at the mall, Santa was already there, ready to entertain the children. But something seemed off about him. His eyes were very red, like he hadn't slept in days, and his whole demeanor had changed. It was as if he couldn't wait for the day to be over and looked highly annoyed. This wasn't like him at all. After the mall closed, Santa retreated to the changing rooms. I was about to do the same when I noticed the presents we were supposed to hand out to the kids on Christmas Eve were missing from the sleigh. Panic washed over me as I searched for the manager, but I found out he had already gone home. The mall was quiet, the lights dimming, and the shops shutting down. It was beginning to creep me out. Feeling uneasy, I decided to check on Santa. I entered the changing room but found it completely empty. That was weird. He always bade me goodbye before leaving. Maybe he'd already left, but something didn't feel right. I entered a cubicle and started changing out of my elf costume and into my regular clothes. That's when suddenly the lights went out, leaving the entire area in darkness. I couldn't tell if it was a power outage or if someone had intentionally shut them off to play with me, but fear began to creep in. I was here alone, with the mall shutting down. What if they locked everything? As I hurriedly left the changing room, I strained my eyes to see. This floor was completely dark. However, I could make out a figure in the distance, a burly man dragging something toward the fire exit. Was it Santa? I called out to him, but he froze and slowly turned to face me. I couldn't see his face, but I swear, I could feel the bad vibes from all the way where I was standing. In an instant, he whipped out something that looked like a pistol. Without thinking, I dropped to the ground, narrowly avoiding the bullet that shattered a nearby glass, setting off the alarms. The blaring alarms echoed through the mall as I got up and ran in the opposite direction, desperately hoping the man wouldn't chase me. With the elevators out of order, I made my way down the stairs. But I must have been out of luck because I tripped over something, tumbling down the steps a long way. I quickly got to my feet and reached for my phone, turning on the flashlight to see what it was. And that's when I saw him. There, lying lifeless on the stairs, was Santa himself. His mouth hung open in a gruesome way. His eyes looked like they would pop out of their sockets. His skin was deathly pale as if the blood had been washed out. There were purple marks on his neck that showed that someone had strangled him to death. My hands shook as I held my phone and I almost threw up at the sight. Driven by pure fear, I ran towards the exit. As I burst out of the back door, I saw the chaos outside. The flashing lights of police cars and the blaring sirens filled the air. The mall's alarms must have alerted them to the horrors that were unfolding within. The police questioned me extensively, and I recounted every chilling detail of what I had seen. They searched the entire mall but didn't find the intruder. It became clear that a lot of valuable items had been stolen. To my horror, the authorities discovered that the real Santa had been dead for over 15 hours. I realized the man I had worked with that day was not the real Santa, but an imposter. The killer had taken his place, hiding in plain sight. I was completely horrified. Unfortunately, all I could remember were his bloodshot eyes, leaving the police with few leads to pursue. The experience left a terrible mark on me, forever changing the way I see Santas working in shopping malls. I can't help but wonder if there's something sinister hiding behind their costumes. I had been working for several years as an accountant in a toy store. It was located at a local mall, and because I was in charge of balancing the books every day, I used to often work very late. One particular evening, I wasn't feeling very well. I was tired and weary, my eyelids grew heavier, and I found myself craving some shut-eye. We had a small break room in the back of the shop, so I made my way there to lie down for a bit before continuing. I must have fallen asleep because when I woke up, I realized everything was closed, and I was trapped inside. The shop's entrance could only be accessed with a code, one which I had not been given for security reasons. I pulled out my phone to call for help, but the battery was dead. It looked like I had to spend the night here at the shop. My eyes fell upon the landline on the reception desk. Hopeful again, I dialed the number of the store owner. But the call went unanswered, leaving me feeling more desperate. I then dialed the number for mall security, and it went through. I explained my situation to them. Relief washed over me as the security guard on the other end assured me he was on his way. However, my newfound hope was overshadowed when I heard something. Faint music began to sound from one of the sections of the shop. It was a haunting melody, and it sent a shiver down my spine. With a mix of curiosity and fear, I cautiously went to find the source of the sound. As I turned the corner, there, in the middle of the aisle, lay a doll. Its plastic limbs were twisted, yet it appeared to be walking and dancing on its own. The sight was chilling. How had it fallen from its shelf? I was uneasy, but I forced myself to steady my nerves and place the doll back on the shelf. Suddenly, a sound came from a nearby aisle, the distinct patter of footsteps. Dread overcame me as the sense of impending danger flooded my being. Someone else was here, locked in the shop with me. Was it a burglar? I couldn't be sure, but my survival instinct kicked in. Without wasting a moment, I calculated the distance to the break room and bolted towards it. I could hear the sound of heavy footsteps chasing me, growing louder with each passing moment. I dared not look back. I reached the break room and slammed the door shut, hastily turning the lock. The intruder pounded on the door with everything he had. I yelled at him to leave me alone, but the pounding persisted. And then suddenly, it was all quiet. I pressed my ear against the door and could hear the man heavily breathing on the other end. Then I heard footsteps, until they faded away. Perhaps the intruder had given up and decided to leave. But my relief was short-lived. Without warning, a heavy object crashed through the door, sending tremors through the room. The intruder was trying to break through. I surveyed my surroundings, searching for anything I could use to barricade the door. I piled furniture, boxes, and anything I could find against the entrance, praying it would hold. I shouted at the intruder that the police were on their way, hoping my words would chase him away. And as soon as the words left my lips, I heard the front door unlocking. And then the security guard called my name. I shouted for the guard to fetch help and informed him that someone else was in the shop. But the guard insisted there was no one else there, and that I must have been mistaken. I opened the door and peered out into the shop. To my astonishment, the store was empty, like he said. Was he hiding somewhere? Could there be another entrance or secret passageway? I told the skeptical security guard what had happened, desperately trying to convince him of the truth. But his dismissive response only made me question my own sanity. He said I was probably overworking and exhausted. To this day, I remain haunted by the mystery of that night. Was the intruder real? Or had my mind played tricks on me?